a year. It is young people, young students. I just met some beautiful young kids right here in Cleveland, kids who are bright, who desperately want to go to college, but they may not be able to make it to college because their families lack the resource. And other people, by the millions, are struggling with student debts of $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year. We don't talk about it much, but there are workers in Cleveland, Burlington, Vermont, who are 60, 62 years of age. They are approaching retirement. And yet half of the older workers in this country have nothing in the bank as they await retirement and turn on the TV and hear people talk about cutting Social Security. There are parts of this country today where life expectancy is going down, where people are living shorter lives than their parents. For the first time in the modern history of America, people living shorter lives out of desperation, out of no hope, out of no jobs, out of no income. There are people who are turning to opioids, they're turning to heroin, they're turning to alcohol, they are turning to suicide because they see nothing in front of them for themselves or their children. Now, we may not like that reality, but it is time we address that reality, and it is time that we determine how, as a nation, we go forward. And let me give you very briefly what I believe is an agenda that works for America, and by the way, is an agenda that by and large, not totally, is supported by the American people. And one of the points that we have to make is that Congress and the Republican leadership today, and Trump, are so far out of touch that when you take their agenda, forget the rhetoric, just put their agenda on the table, my guess is that 85% of the American people do not support it. Go out here, go out on a street corner in Cleveland, or in my state, or California, or in Mississippi, or in Kansas, or Nebraska, stand on a street corner and say to somebody, do you think it makes sense that we provide hundreds and hundreds of billion dollars in tax breaks for the top 1%, and that we then cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and federal aid to education? If 15% of the American people believe that makes sense, I would be surprised. That is precisely the agenda of the Republican leadership today, because they are more concerned about meeting the needs of the Koch brothers and the billionaire class than the needs of ordinary Americans. Now, when we talk about a progressive agenda, what does it mean? Not a radical idea. What about joining the rest of the industrialized world and guaranteeing health care to all people as a right? Through a Medicare for all single-payer program. Radical idea? Well, I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They have had that idea. They have implemented that idea for decades. They spend about 50% per capita compared to what we spend. They guarantee health care and provide health care to all of their people. At a time when 1 out of 5 Americans who go to a doctor's office can't afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors write, and at the same time as the 5 major drug companies made $50 billion in profit a couple of years ago, maybe it's time to tell the pharmaceutical industry they cannot continue to rip off the American people and charge us the highest prices in the world. That a radical idea? My guess that would be supported by about 90% of the American people. And one of the reasons that the middle class is in decline, and one of the reasons that our people are working 2 or 3 jobs, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, is that wages in this country are too low and have not kept pace with inflation. And that is why I have introduced legislation, or will soon introduce legislation. I'll have a whole lot of co-sponsors saying that in America, not a radical idea, if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. Let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And when we talk about wages, how about ending the absurdity, the unfairness of women making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? A radical idea, equal pay for equal work. And maybe, just maybe, now Donald Trump has a brilliant idea for tax reform. You've read, he's talking about tax reform. Here is his brilliant idea. He wants to repeal the estate tax. The estate tax applies to the top 0.2%. 99.8% of the Americans would not gain a nickel. And yet, repealing that estate tax would cost us $353 billion. Trump wants to cut Medicare, Medicaid, federal aid to education, Head Start, $353 billion in tax breaks for the top 0.2%. Well, I have a slightly different approach toward tax reform. And my approach is that maybe we start asking the largest, most profitable corporations and the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. When we talk about international embarrassment, turn off the TV when you hear these people talking about family values. We don't have family values when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any industrialized nation on earth. You don't have family values when we are one of the very few countries in the world, not just industrialized countries, poor countries, that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today in Cleveland, a woman is giving birth. She may be forced to go back to work in a week or two because she lacks the income to take care of her newborn baby. I think it's time to end that absurdity. Let's guarantee 12 weeks paid family and medical leave. All of you know we live in a highly competitive global economy. And in order for us to succeed now and in the future, we need the best educated workforce in the world. 20, 30 years ago, we had the best educated workforce in the world. We were number one in terms of the percentage of our people who graduated college. In case you don't know, today we are in 11th place. Now, how are you going to compete in the future when new jobs require new skills, when the best paying jobs require a higher education? And that is why I fervently believe that we need to make public colleges and universities in this country tuition free. And people say, well, Bernie, that's a nice idea. What other free things you're giving away today? But I find that the same people who make that comment to me don't say to Donald Trump, do you really think that billionaires need more in tax breaks? So we're going to pay for free tuition at public colleges and universities by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. We need major criminal justice reform. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We should not be having more people in jail, 2.2 million, disproportionately African American, Latino, Native American than any other country on earth. There are communities all over this country, in inner cities and in rural America, where youth unemployment is 20, 30, 40%. You don't hear much about it, but that is the truth. So maybe, just maybe, it might make more sense to invest in jobs for our young people, in education for our young people, rather than in jails and more incarceration. And furthermore, we have today, as you know, 11 million undocumented people. And I have had the opportunity, as I've traveled the country, to speak to many of them. Vast, vast, vast majority of them are hardworking, honest people. Many of them are trying to raise children. Many of them have been in this country for a long, long time. Today, they are living in the shadows. They are living in fear. They are exploited on the jobs because they don't have any legal rights to protect us, to protect them. Maybe instead of scapegoating those people, it might make more sense for us to move to comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Lastly, but certainly not least, is an issue where I must say, in many respects, Trump campaigned on one set of ideas and he is governing on a very different set of ideas. But I must confess, sadly, that there is an area where he has not changed his mind and he has been consistent. When he ran for president, Donald Trump told us that he believed climate change was a hoax. Well, I say to the president, climate change is not a hoax. I say to the president that if you listen to the overwhelming majority of scientists who study this issue, they will tell you that climate change is real, that it is caused by human activity, that it is already causing devastating problems in this country and around the world, and that if we do not act boldly by transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, what we will be seeing in the years to come is more drought, more floods, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, more global conflict as people fight over limited natural resources. So I say to President Trump, pay attention to the scientists, not just the greed of the fossil fuel industry, which is prepared to sacrifice our future generations in order to earn short-term profits. So, I think I've probably raised one or two issues that will allow you to ask some questions. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to take the questions you have. Thank you very much.
Sure. Go ahead. Today we are enjoying a forum with Senator Bernie Sanders. We're about to begin the Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those of you who are joining us by webcast. Please form a line behind the two microphones at the front of the room to ask your question. If you would like to tweet a question, please tweet at the City Club. And our staff will try to work your questions into the program. We want to remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. Say it with me, brief and to the point. And that would allow us to get more questions in so that the senator can answer. May we now please have our first question.
My name is Greg Gianforte. I'm a 30-year-old scientist. I'm running for Congress in a gerrymandered district for the GOP, of course. I was just wondering what advice you'd have for someone like me with almost no connections, no money, facing an uphill battle like you did, running for Congress in a bad district to help represent my generation and to continue the political revolution.
No. So I think one of the things that we try to do during the presidential campaign and are working very hard right now is to do exactly what you're doing, is to involve people in the political process. My answer to your good question is to focus on grassroots approach, is to knock on as many doors as you can, to get as many volunteers to help you knocking on doors. At the end of the day, money is clearly very, very important.